Ladies and gentlemen, it is here. It is here, son. Man, let me tell you something. DCeased is back. And son, Tom Taylor starts us off with a bang. Okay, here's the thing, right? DCeased is finally back. Superman returns in this story, thank God, right? So we get to see whatever came of like zombie Superman, which is gonna be awesome. Not a spoiler, because a ton of other stuff happens here. But here's the kicker. As you guys know, DCeased is a monthly release, which means we cover this one today. We don't cover the next one until like September, like late September 20th. And then we gotta wait till the end of October and so on and so forth, right? It comes out once a month. I still say they should have released these as an original graphic novel. Having said that, this story is amazing, right? So what this does, and it's actually one of the coolest things, what this does is it opens up on Krypton with the city of Kandor and the origin of Supergirl. Remember, Supergirl's a character that we haven't seen yet in DCeased. Like, we have not seen her yet. And it's one of the cool things, because the more I read DCeased, the more I think it kind of feels like injustice in terms of all of Tom Taylor's world building. And so what we end up getting here is Supergirl basically being sent away from Krypton by her family, and instead of arriving on Earth, she travels somewhere else. Now, all of this is really being given to us by way of, like, literally Brainiac showing up here, Krypton's imminent end, its destruction, all that kind of stuff, what you normally expect from the origin of Supergirl. But here's the cool thing, right? Here's the funny thing that happens. So the statement that's made by her family, by her parents is this: it will take many years for you to reach your new home, daughter. Though Krypton will be long gone, to you it will seem like no time has passed. We have searched throughout the universe and we have found a planet. When you reach this world, you will have incredible abilities, but you will not be alone in this. There will be others on this world with fantastic powers. You will be special, but not apart. And when she arrives here, the statement her parents make is, we are sending you to New Genesis. Jor-El would send his son to live with primitives. We are sending you to live with gods. The crazy thing about this is when she arrives on New Genesis, everybody's infected with the AntiLife Virus. Remember, like, literally, Darkseid went nuts. He was the first to truly be infected outside of like Cyborg, but he was the first being to truly be infected and then seemingly went on a warpath. New Genesis was hit by that, which means Highfather and all these new gods that exist out there in DC Comics, they're all zombified, if we want to use that phrase, right? But they're all basically, they're infected with the AntiLife Virus now. For those of you guys coming from Marvel Comics and you're not necessarily sure what all this means, imagine that like a being like Galactus was infected with the AntiLife Virus and it was like a planet of Galactuses, and that's what you're looking at, right? That's the kind of thing you're looking at, like the kind of mid-level cosmic entities. So let's say somebody like Mephisto and Thanos and Galactus and these guys, that's the level of power that we're talking about here. It's pretty intense. Now, I use those comparisons as more of like a contextual thing. So before some of you guys get in the comments and you're like, nerp-de-derp-derp-derp, actually, Thanos is not as powerful as Highfather derp-de-derp. I'm not making a power comparison. I'm simply just saying that like these guys are, at least in terms of the role they play, they're comparable. But the thing about this is where Supergirl initially flees for her life, one thing to remember is that the new gods are in a lot of ways on her same level of power. And so she is seemingly immediately overtaken by these guys and then infected by the virus. So quite literally, she arrives on this world and then basically dies. And so following that, what you end up doing is, of course, you kind of get a little bit of an explanation from Tom Taylor insofar as where things stand, which is to say that yes, there was the AntiLife Virus that broke out on Earth, but they ultimately discovered a cure. So while not every single person across the world is cured, most are, and they're still curing a ton every day. But lest we forget, there is basically the superheroes who exist here on Earth, but one of the things you remember is at the end of the first DCeased comic, a bunch of the heroes escaped Earth. They took off, right? They literally got in spaceships and left. They're gone. So there are some superheroes who are still here, but a lot of the ones that we know have basically taken off. And so what we end up doing here is, of course, switching over to the ones who are here, right? So you have Damian Wayne, who's the new Batman, you have Jonathan Kent, who's the new Superman, so on and so forth, and what they're trying to figure out is what they're going to do. Initially, Jonathan's like, now that we have a cure, it's time to go find my dad. It's time to go find Superman and to basically save him. You know, the other part of this is Damian just being like, I could come with you, right? Like I could join you on this. And it's kind of a funny banter back and forth because Jonathan's whole thing is like, I mean, it's the center of the sun, Damian. I doubt Batman has the ability ability or any technology, I doubt that Bruce had anything that would allow him to enter the center of the sun. Now, as we know from Batman comics, the fact that Batman is literally, this guy can just reach into his pocket and have whatever he needs at any point in time in order to defeat somebody because prep time or something like that. He probably did, but it's still a funny thing. What's really cool about this, though, and this is one of the things that I love about Tom Taylor. Tom Taylor's great when it comes to developing interpersonal relationships in what is, in effect, a post-apocalyptic story, right? Like, Injustice kind of felt post-apocalyptic to a degree insofar as the heroes as we knew them versus the heroes as they exist now. And then, of course, like, DCeased is absolutely a post-apocalyptic story where society's kind of rebuilding itself. But the relationship between Jonathan and Damian has largely been maintained. These guys know each other just as well as they ever did, and they've become some of the best of friends that you could possibly imagine. So it's no wonder why it is that Jonathan is not in any rush to let Damian join him in the center of the sun, not necessarily even knowing if Damian can survive. But at the end of the day, the decision is made, right? Because of the fact that this is essentially Superman, and because this is Superman who spent the last 5 years at the center of the sun. Remember, when the whole DCeased thing first ended up happening, when it first popped off, towards the end of the story, Superman was infected. He ended up being infected by the AntiLife Virus. And when the heroes were trying to escape, those who managed to get away from Earth, when they were trying to take off, they were initially being attacked. Ultimately, Superman was momentarily held off and then ended up basically walking away, right? Ended up flying into the sun to basically charge himself with solar energy, and has been doing so for the last 5 years. And that's what's kind of crazy, is because when the heaviest hitters who were here on Earth get to the sun and they get to where Superman is, one, of course, they have the cure, but two, they didn't realize how radically things had changed. That when Jonathan is told by Green Canary, right, when basically Dinah Lance, Black Canary, following the death of Hal Jordan, she basically ended up becoming the new Green Lantern, that when this happened, that she tells him, that's not your father in there, Jonathan. That's something that you have to keep in mind. That's not your dad. That is an infected guy. So while the goal is to cure him, if it comes down to the fact that we can't, we may have to kill him. And that has to be something that you can be okay with. And while Jonathan doesn't necessarily say that he is, at the end of the day, he has to be. There's no alternative here. Either Superman gets cured or Superman has to die. And so entering into the sun, what Jonathan and really the others failed to take into account, or maybe just hadn't really been able to understand the full gravity of, is how powerful Superman would become, sitting in the core of the sun for 5 straight years, absorbing all of its solar energy. Like, just standing there, absorbing solar energy, right? I mean, Superman is powered by solar energy. So he's faster and stronger than anybody could have ever imagined, and faster and stronger than he's ever been in his existence. A perfect example of this is that Green Canary literally creates a hard-like construct to encase Superman. And Tom Taylor kind of plays with this idea in saying that under any normal circumstance, this would have held him. Under any normal circumstance, Superman would have been encased and he wouldn't have been able to get away. He shattered it in an instant, right? Just like literally just broke it like glass. Now, with enough time, normal Superman probably would have been able to escape, but that's one of the things to know about Tom Taylor's writing. His depiction of characters from one story to the next outside of DC's continuity really changes. So Superman during Injustice, for example, was stupidly overpowered. I mean, it was nuts how powerful he was. And some would actually argue it was the most accurate depiction of Superman's strength that's been done in DC Comics for quite some time, which, if I'm being honest, I'm kind of inclined to agree with. Others would say he was just wildly overpowered for the sake of the story. So that's why Tom Taylor's writing, when it comes to characters, you can't necessarily take their strength levels as he depicts them as an absolute truth. It's just one of many variations. That's why we kind of have a main DC universe and just a baseline that exists out there. But the thing about this is that it literally takes all these guys to try to step in and do something, and they're literally trying to hold Superman off as best they can. But we never actually find out, or at least we don't find out here, what happens. All we know is they seemingly have him held in place, and then basically like Green Canary is like, now, right? Like, Cyborg, inject him. And so what you end up doing is jumping to Earth 2 days later. And this is cool because what it basically says is like, this is where the other heroes had gone off to, right? They had basically formed kind of a new world for themselves, a new Earth. And that's one of the things to know that had happened right at the end of the main DC series, that the heroes found a new place to live. When they arrive here, of course, you've got President Lane, right? Lois Lane, who's basically acting president. You've got Guy Gardner, you've got John Stewart, the Green Lanterns that we're usually familiar with. But while they're here, suddenly they're met by the arrival, or at least the energy signature of an apocalyptic force, which of course turns out to be a boom tube. But as soon as this opens, their first thought is like, we're under attack, right? Like, everybody respawn. But the thing about this is that once the tube opens, it's actually the good guys. Not only is it the good guys, it's this really beautiful and amazing moment because you basically get like Superman who shows up, who's been essentially cured, right? Not only that, when his arm was ripped off before, it's been replaced by a new arm, which is really, really awesome. So of course, Lois Lane is very excited to see her man. But then the other part of this, and this is probably one of the more beautiful moments here, is that Jonathan Kent was also cured, like the actual Jonathan Kent, right? Like Superman's dad. So now you have like, you have like the entire family essentially reunited, right? Jonathan and Martha are reunited. The Superman and Lois are reunited. It's a very beautiful moment here. Not only that, where you do have, you have Big Barda and you've got Scott Free. Of course, they're cured again, and their intention is to go back home to basically New Genesis, or at least to Apocalypse or what have you, and to find their son wherever it is that he may be. Because one of the things to remember is that that entire area is in a complete and total state of chaos. And because it's in a state of chaos, they don't know exactly where their son is. All they can do is just go to that realm and hope that they can somehow find him. Now, they don't know that everything's bad, but the crazy thing here, and what's really also a bit of torment, is you switch over to Damian talking to Alfred and actually revealing everything to Alfred insofar as they have a cure and all that kind of stuff. Now, the thing about this is Alfred would have found out eventually. And so it was really the responsibility of Damian to say to Alfred, there is a cure for the AntiLife Virus, we can bring everybody back. The bigger reason why Alfred is so tortured by this is because if you remember, in the original DCeased event, when Bruce Wayne was infected, nobody knew what it was. And Alfred had to kill Bruce Wayne, and he had to kill Tim Drake and Dick Grayson. He literally killed them all with a shotgun. So they're dead. They're not infected, just kind of roaming around out there. They had to die. And that's the thing. Alfred takes it as a massive personal loss. And the truth from what Damian says is, you would have found out about this, and so it's my responsibility to tell you, but there's no way you could have known what would have happened. There's no way you could have known that there would have been a cure developed for this. All we knew is that all these different superheroes, these beings out there, were infected by some kind of zombified virus, and they would have killed everybody they could find or infect everybody they could find. You did what you thought was the right thing at that point in time. But Alfred still rejects that and says like, no, I killed my sons, right? And so it's one of those things where as a father figure, he just can't let that go. He just can't walk away from this. And so what you do is you switch over to what is in effect about the next day, and you have all these Brainiac probes that end up arriving and basically showing up to Earth 2. Now, initially they're taken out by like Superman and Jessica Cruz, one of the other Green Lanterns, and so on and so forth, right? The Green Lantern Corps itself responds as you would expect. And so these probes are kind of annihilated because their first thought is, okay, one, these probes are a credible threat because each one of these guys are very capable, but two, Brainiac probes mean Brainiac's arrival is imminent. And he literally shows up hours later. Now, here's a crazy thing. Once they get to the Brainiac vessel, they start to realize that like something's wrong. The ship's in ragtag condition. It looks like it's basically limping along. By all standards of measurement, this Brainiac ship looks like a car that's falling apart and is out of gas and is literally just kind of limping along the highway until it just stops. That's basically what this looks like. It's just in a dilapidated condition. And Brainiac is nothing if not meticulous. And so this idea of his ship just being torn asunder and in little bits and pieces is concern for everybody, because the thought of Superman, or at least the thought of John Stewart, is Superman, can you see inside, right? Can you use your X-ray vision to see? And his response is no. That was one of the first things Brainiac did when he developed his ship, was to design it in such a way to where I can't see inside, anybody with X-ray vision can't see inside, to minimize any weaknesses that this vessel may have. So the only alternative they have is to go in, right? Literally, Guy Gardner's like, we have to go in there. Like, we've got to get inside this ship and we have to see what's going on, which means we may find ourselves in a face-to-face confrontation with Brainiac. Now, where Superman tells Jonathan, I'm going in, you have to wait here, this is Superman not necessarily realizing how far his son has come. Jonathan has been through a lot and he's experienced a lot and grown up much faster than Superman possibly could have imagined. Of course, because Superman was zombified and he was in the sun. No way he could have known. But this is not one of those instances when Jonathan stays behind, and he even says that, I'm not staying here. And so at the end of the day, it's Jonathan and Superman who enter into the ship. And when they get in there, what they find is that Brainiac is no longer a threat. Instead, like, his body's been ripped in half. He's just kind of hanging there, just sort of strung up. And he's like, we have to stop him. The gods are dead, but they still come, Kal-El. They will poison the universe, and the gods will end everything. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. What a hell of a cliffhanger for this first one. We gotta wait a month now, and I will catch you all later. Peace.